Hey guys, this is Mike Mahaffey, the old bastard BJJ guy, here for BJJ Mental Models. Back in my day, we had to walk uphill in the snow both ways to get to the academy just to learn some crappy technique from a random purple belt. You kids have it so easy because now you can just subscribe to BJJ Mental Models Premium and get tons of great audio courses to learn new techniques, enhance your mindset, and entertain yourself. You can even get personalized rolling reviews from some of your favorite BJJ Mental Models coaches, including me. It's like having your own seminar, you spoiled little whippersnappers. So what are you waiting for? Subscribe to BJJ Mental Models Premium right now, get off my lawn, and go train.
Hey, welcome to BJJ Mental Models. I'm Steve Kwan. BJJ Mental Models is your guide to a conceptual and intelligent jiu-jitsu approach, and I'm back again with another little mini episode for you folks. This is going to be the final part 6 in our series on core mechanics. So for those who have missed the first few, and I don't know why you're here if you missed the first few, I would definitely recommend going back and listening to those. But in any event, when we talk about core mechanics in jiu-jitsu, we're talking about 6 basic ideas: frames, levers, wedges, clamps, hooks, and posts. And so today we're talking about the last one, posts. That said, you're going to get maximum value if you listen to all of these, so I would suggest going back and listening to those prior mini episodes first. They're, of course, mini, as the name implies, so should be a quick listen. I will put a link to all of those in the show notes in case you missed them. But let's talk about posts here. If you listen to the sound bites that a lot of instructors share, you might be under the impression that posts are kind of a bad thing. You'll hear instructors say things like, "Don't post with your hands on the floor," or "Your objective is to make the other person post." And when you hear that, it sounds like posting might be a bad thing, but it's really not. Posting is just about when you use an extremity from your body to balance and base off of the floor. When you're walking, you're posting on the floor with both of your feet. There's nothing wrong about that. But in the context of jiu-jitsu, where we get into these odd situations on the ground, there are other things that it makes sense to post with. You might post with your hands on the floor. You might even post with your head. And we're going to talk about all of these different options as we go. Additionally, you don't have to post on the floor. You can post on your opponent. Sometimes that's preferable. As an example, if you're in someone's guard, you will often be told, don't post on the floor. You want to post with your hands on your opponent. I don't know if that's really the most critical advice ever, but it is a good beginner tip that a lot of beginners will be told, because if they post with their hands on the floor, it opens them up to things like kimuras. So that's just another common piece of advice that your instructor has probably given you. But all of that said, let's talk about posts and why they're important. Posts are a big part of how we derive our base in jiu-jitsu. When you are absorbing force, or when you are generating force by driving off of the floor or a surface, it's probably going to be your posts that you do it with. Really, the big bulk of our body, our core, our torso, can't move that much on its own. In order to move the center mass of our body, our torso, we need to use our arms and our legs, sometimes even our head, to generate force in a direction. And so that's ultimately what we're doing in jiu-jitsu. We're using our arms and legs to move our center mass around. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier, unless you are just lying down on the floor, flat, you're probably always posting with something. And even if you are on the floor, for example, if you're on bottom side control, you're probably still posting with your feet. That's how you generate a bridge, for example. A lot of powerful force gets generated when you do that. You can't bridge very effectively unless your feet are on the floor, and that's a post. So first and foremost, posting is not necessarily a bad thing. It is just a way that we can generate base. Where posting becomes a problem is if you're posting in a way that exposes your arms or your legs or another part of your body so that your opponent can attack it. That's ultimately where posting is dangerous. So examples, you will often see people who do the kinds of sweeps where you elevate the person up and over your head. Much of the time when you do that, what you're trying to do is get the person to post with their hands on the floor, because the alternative is they're going to face plant. So what do? They post with their hands, they try to use that to balance and walk themselves back. But you, as the guard player, if you can elevate a person like that up and over your head, You're trying to get them to post because then their hands are occupied, and that gives you the ability to do other things with the rest of their body, like go into leg entanglements, or maybe get up and dogfight, even get to their back. So part of the reason why you want someone to post is because if someone does post, then whatever part of their body they're posting with is now occupied. We'll talk about the different weapons of the human body in upcoming mini episodes, but generally speaking, the more of your opponent's weapons you can take out of the game, the easier it's going to be to grapple them. So part of the reason why we want people to post is because if they are posting on their hands, now those are two weapons, their hands, that we don't have to worry about, and it's a lot easier to grapple someone if they're posting with their hands. With their feet, on the other hand, is a little bit different. It's very natural for us as human beings to be posting with our feet, but if you off-balance a person enough, you can force them to post in an angle that is bad for them. Many sweeps against standing opponents work because when you push or pull people, you force them to post with their legs so that they don't just fall over. But the way that they post with their legs might create openings to get into leg entanglements or to knock them over in another direction. And if we're standing up, posts are also still important. If you've played judo for any period of time, or if you've listened to BJJ Mental Models, you've probably heard the term kazushi. This is the art of balance breaking. The terminology is very popular in judo. Kazushi is a huge part of how you do stand-up effectively. It's very difficult to nail a throw or a takedown on someone who has full base. So in judo, you're constantly pushing and pulling them, and the reason you're doing that is because you're trying to force them to react and post with their feet so they don't fall over and lose their balance. And then when you get them off balance, or when you get their feet in an awkward position, that's when it opens up easier opportunities to go for throws or takedowns. So to summarize all of this, when you try to make your opponent post, you're either doing that because it's going to take those weapons out of play, or it's going to make them move their body into a position where it's a lot easier to attack a follow-up. Now, if you are the person doing the posting, as I mentioned earlier, posting is not necessarily always a bad thing. It's a part of Jiu-Jitsu. The lesson is you always want to make sure that you post in a way where you're not exposing yourself to vulnerabilities. The common example, as I brought up earlier, is when you are in someone's guard, putting your hand on the floor is something that instructors will often tell you not to do, because you're posting on the floor, it gives your opponent something to attack, it takes one of your weapons out of play. But you can post intelligently. If you grab onto their hips, if you grab their lapel, that can be a much safer post because you're still posting with your hand, but by posting on top of their body, especially in the gi where you can latch onto something, you can make it a relatively solid post. And the other benefit to posting on top of your opponent is you might take away their movement opportunities as well. When you post on your opponent, you're putting down body weight on top of them. That gives you the ability to get some movement, while it may reduce your opponent's ability to move. You can even submit people with a post. Rob Bernacki has a choke he calls the Roadhouse choke. Basically, he posts on their throat such that it cuts off blood flow through their carotids. So that's an example of how a post can actually be a submission as well. If you're on top, this is something to consider. Posting on your opponent is sometimes an effective strategy to take away bits of your opponent's alignment without having to do much. One of my favorite things to do when I'm standing up against both a standing opponent or a guard player is to try stepping on their feet. That takes away a lot of their movement options. It is a very easy way to create a situation against a guard player where it's a lot harder for them to maintain their guard, because if you're standing on their feet, they can't easily move their legs, which means that their hip mobility is reduced. So posting on your opponent is a valid option. The thing to always bear in mind, though, is that when you are posting, whether it be on the floor or on your opponent, you want to do so in such a way that your opponent cannot easily turn that post into a lever. If they can grab onto that post and attack it, then that's probably something that you want to avoid. Additionally, there is an element of safety that you need to think about with posts. When you are posting, you are putting your body weight down on top of an extremity of your body. This can lead to injury if you're not careful. So if you are posting with your arm on the floor, if you are straight arming, it's possible that your arm could get hyperextended. So a lot of the time when people post on the floor with their arms, they'll have a slight bend in their arm so that it's a bit harder for their arms to get hyperextended. Of course, the other example is posting on your head. That is an option. I personally do not like to do it because of the risk of injury, but people will do it. And especially highly competitive people who are willing to take on a chance of injury might be more willing to post on their head. There's a variant of turtle where you post on your head. I don't like to use that variant because of the risk of injury. So that is something to consider, is that because you're putting all of your weight down on top of an extremity of your body, depending on how you and your opponent move, there is the possibility of injury. So when you are posting, always make sure you at least understand the injury risk and make sure that if you do choose to post, it is a risk that you're willing to accept. With all of that said, that is the 6th of the core mechanics in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Why do all of these matter? Well, these are, I guess, what a high school teacher would call the simple machines of Jiu-Jitsu. Frames, levers, wedges, clamps, hooks, and posts. The reason this stuff helps is because once you start thinking of Jiu-Jitsu in terms of these simple mental models, it's a lot easier to deconstruct a technique and understand what's making it work. It's a lot easier to troubleshoot a technique and figure out why it might not be working for you. And it's a lot easier to just invent stuff on the fly. And the reason why is because instead of following potentially complicated instructions to complete a technique, you're just looking for these simple mechanics. And as long as you can find those simple mechanics, you could probably create something that's going to work okay. So with all of that said, there you go, 6 episodes on the core mechanics of Jiu-Jitsu. I will put links to all of the other ones in the show notes, and I do recommend you listen to those sequentially. I really enjoy doing these mini episodes, and I'd love to hear your feedback on how they could be improved and what you think. You can contact me or get the rest of all of our stuff, including the podcast, the newsletter, and BJJ Mental Models Premium at bjjmentalmodels.com, and I'll put a link in the show notes. Thanks a lot for listening.